In my opinion, the most underrated Sony telephoto lens today is the Sony 70-300mm G lens. That's because of 4 specific reasons: the focal range, the size, the price in relation to quality, and then the performance. So we're gonna be chatting through all of those points, starting with the focal range. When you're looking at telephoto lenses, you look at the 70-200s generally, and then the big lenses like the 100-400 and the 200-600. But when I was starting out, I wanted something that gave me a lot of range, but didn't have those large sizes. So this 70-300 kind of fit perfectly in the middle of those 2 different white lens categories and give me a lot of coverage going all the way from 70mm up to 300mm. So I was able to shoot landscapes up into those kind of smaller wildlife ranges. And then when using it on a crop lens, I was able to get up into like that 400 plus range. So it gave me a lot of versatility, which leads me into the next point. Having so much range in a small form factor, the 70-300 fits perfectly in that range, but is so much smaller than the other lenses in those kind of telephoto ranges offered by Sony with the extra quality images that you get out of this. As you can see, this here in my hand, it's a little bit longer than one hand grip of mine, and it's very comparable to the Sony 16-35 and the 24-70. So for a range of 70-300mm, I really do think this is one of the best options if you're very active, if you're traveling a lot, or if you just want to keep your kit really small. You get so much versatility because of the external zoom. I know a lot of people don't like that, but when you want to keep your kit small, sometimes you have to make some trade-offs. I personally have used this in crazy conditions, all the way from like pouring rain in Patagonia to like -40°C days here in Canada with snowy, blowy, windy days. And I haven't had any issues. As long as I kind of keep it dry and make sure to dry it out at the end of the day, I have not had a single problem. But that's where I'm willing to make the trade-off because I wanted that small size. Nowadays I have a large backpack, but when I was starting out, I just had a small camera cube, and that allowed me to keep my kit really small. The third point that I really wanted to touch on is the price to the quality of the image you get out of this. The Sony 70-200 f2.8, which seems to be a standard that everybody wants to use, is not only much bigger, but it's much more expensive, nearly twice the price of this, and you're losing out on 100mm of range. So I think this is priced, or I paid around 1,500 Canadian dollars. I'll pop the current market price up here right now. But as we'll find out in our next point, the quality that you get from this lens for the price that you pay, I think is not really comparable to anything out there. You're gonna pay a lot more for not only the focal range, the size, but also the quality that you're getting out of here for photo and video. I'm personally not a pixel peeper, but I'll share some examples of the images and photos that I've got out of here, and I've had nothing but really great performance from this lens, which leads me into the final point of why I love this lens so much, and that is the performance. So as I said, I aimed for this lens because of the size, and I wanted that range from 70-300, but I also needed some performance. And I've used this lens now for 3 years as a professional, and I've used some other lenses, and I still keep going back to this just because of the size. In the performance realm, I've had nothing but good things to say about this. One thing I do have to mention is that you're losing out on that lower aperture of something like the 70-200, but for most of my subjects, I'm not really kind of worried about that because I'm shooting them in brighter conditions, and even the 70-200 2.8 is going to struggle in very low light conditions, so you're not often using a telephoto then. Other than the aperture point, I have had super great results. This lens is crazy sharp. People always ask me which lens it is when I'm sharing images from it, because the results that you get, especially with the Sony autofocus locking onto eyes and stuff like that, you're getting a really crisp tack sharp, especially when you're shooting in the proper manual settings. That I really love the image quality that comes out of this. It also has really great color rendering. When you're using the Sony lenses, I find that you get the best results, and because this is native to Sony, I get really great color, and I love how it's rendered out through the raw files with the Sony cameras. Something else that I don't think is mentioned often about this lens too, or just Sony lenses in general, is stabilization. This lens, especially even when you get out to 300mm, I find my images and videos being super stable. I've shot everything from moving wildlife, flying eagles, all the way to shooting slow moving subjects when you're trying to hold a very still hand, such as bighorn sheep here in the Rockies. And really the image stabilization is pretty incredible. It takes away all of those jitters, and you have a couple of different options. You can turn it off and you can turn it on. So if you want to have more of that handheld feel, you can get that. But I absolutely love how stabilized these images are coming out, and it really helps with long lens photos or video especially. That is a quick breakdown of why this lens continues to stay in my kit when I am able to afford some of the other options on the market. I do have a Sony 200 to 600 as a comparison, so you can see the size here difference, but I use this lens for stuff that needs a lot more range. But when I'm just using a walk around lens that I don't need 600 millimeters, I always pretty much opt for this. These two lenses, the 200, 600 and 70-300, are very aligned with the quality, and I know they're not the G Master series of lenses, but even now working with clients, treating clients for companies like GMC and international tourism boards, I'm still using both of these lenses professionally, and I've had no complaints about the image quality that is coming out of these lenses. I just wanted to bring this up because I think this lens is often overlooked. For all those reasons that I've mentioned today, I'm going to continue keeping this lens in my bag. I've used a bunch of lenses from a variety of third-party providers as well as Sony lenses, and I continue to pick this one up. I really do think people can get caught up with gear, but if you find something that works, you don't need to change it up. There's bigger and better things out every year, but as long as it works for you, that is the reason. So these are my reasons why I think this is the most underrated Sony lens, especially in the telephoto market today.